Hello. Today we're going to talk about the Harlem Renaissance. After World War I, millions of African Americans relocated from the rural, segregated South to the urban North. The Great Migration of African Americans to northern industrial centers increased as World War I production needs and labor shortages boosted job opportunities. During the 1920s, African American art, music, and literature based in Harlem, New York gained recognition as an important component of world culture. The Harlem Renaissance inspired so many art forms throughout the 20th century and still today. The artist's part of the Renaissance helped surge new ideas and new racial attitudes as part of an artistic and political awakening. What separated them from their white counterparts were using their view of an artistic endeavor as an extension against oppression. Every time my wife and I travel to New Orleans, we are reminded of the great jazz musician Louis Armstrong. We play his music in the car as we are crossing Lake Pontchartrain heading towards the city. I knew that he has made a significant impact to the music world. However, I did not know it began during the Harlem Renaissance. Billboard magazine called Louis Armstrong the most important figure in the history of jazz. Jazz music was fast, free, loud, rebellious, and fun. So, in many ways, it reflected the characteristics and issues of the 1920s. Jazz and blues were personal expressions of the African American experience during that time. The range of African American musicians such as Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Bessie Smith, and Cab Calloway speaks to the range of experiences for 20th century African American life. It will be a music style that influences artists for generations yet to come. Arguably, one of the most important writers of the Harlem Renaissance was Langston Hughes. Being originally from Harlem, New York, Hughes's writings was influenced by his life growing up in a primarily African American neighborhood. His work would help shape literature and politics throughout all of America. Like all Harlem Renaissance writers, Langston was determined to represent the African American life as authentic as possible. These writers, such as Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Gwendolyn Brooks, and Conti Cullen, used their literary talents through poetry, novels, and plays to promote racial pride, equality, condemn racism, and celebrated all of the great elements of African American culture. Although he was relatively unknown during his career, by the time the 1960s came around, Aaron Douglas was known as the father of African American art. He helped shape a modern artistic language that represented African Americans in a new light. Douglas's works were regularly featured in Black magazines like Crisis and Opportunity, which helped influence the younger artists and writers. Like other members of the Harlem Renaissance, the artists were faced with a difficult decision to either create art as a Black artist or simply as an artist. Artists such as Douglas, Jacob Lawrence, William Johnson, and Archibald Motley Jr. chose to paint as Black artists that would express the Black experience. They would go on to influence the first modern Afrocentric cultural movement and form a Black avant garde in the visual arts. As Aaron Douglas grew older, he even became an educator and helped to influence a new generation of African American artists. But all great things must come to an end. The Great Depression and corresponding stock market crash deflated the momentum of that period. The majority of people became unemployed, and instead of focusing on the arts, they tried to survive daily. Yet the Harlem Renaissance planted artistic seeds that would continue to grow for decades. Even the historical markers that are famous within Memphis, such as Stax, Beale Street, and W.C. Handy, all had some sort of influence from the Harlem Renaissance. In the decades that followed, the Harlem Renaissance would inspire new waves of musicians, writers, and artists, both Black and white, that would help lay the groundwork for the civil rights movement, future political leaders, and the Black arts movement, among many others. Thank you.